open up this Hermiston City Council meeting for March 13th, 2023 with the declaration of a quorum, all members present. Please join me in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome this evening. Thank you for joining us. If you're just now joining us, the council had a work session prior to this meeting where we talked about animal control and started the conversation on our annual goal prioritization. So, Mr. Smith, we wanted to change something on the agenda, is that correct?
That's correct. We'd like to move item 12C up to right before item 7.
Okay. Council okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to move 12C, review and prioritization of council goals, up to right after our proclamations, presentations, and recognitions, and before 7. Okay. Any other changes, Mr.?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, so tonight we have a presentation from the Hermiston School District, Assistant Superintendent Jake Bacon. Welcome back.
Good evening. That's been a while, sorry about that.
Good to see you.
Well,
Microphone, yeah.
Is it, sounds like it's okay. I'll start off with enrollment numbers here to begin the evening, and we are sitting right now district-wide at 5,361 students. What's unique about that number is it's 58 students down from where we were at last year, which 58 students can be something that we really need to be paying attention to. But statewide averages are low across Oregon, which means it's impacting our funding levels differently than what it has, than what we've seen in the past. And so funding levels are actually maintaining with our current practices, even with our student population that has dropped. Because the ADMW is adjusted by the average number of students across the state in each school district, and so with everybody being down, it stayed consistent. So that's a unique and interesting impact to our statewide attendance at this point. And with that, we're jumping into conferences coming up here towards the end of the month. So conference week will begin March 27th, and just a reminder, secondary schools, they will host their conferences on that Monday and Wednesday, and elementary will host on Tuesday and Thursday of that week, and with our traditional Thursday would be a non-student day for elementary. It's all-day conferences, and then Friday is a non-student, non-staff day as well for the hours worked throughout the evenings for staff. Spring break, that means, jumps right into spring break. So again, it's all about that glass that's being half empty or half full of when spring break begins. So you can jump into it saying that it begins on that Friday, the 31st of March, or it can start that following week in April on that Monday. So I'll let you guys, again, make that choice. I had this year with the calendar, the way it's lined up, students or staff report back on April 10th. That following, which is an in-service and work day for staff, and students will return on Tuesday, April the 11th. Speaking of calendar, the board's actually having discussion tonight on improving next year's calendar, so we'll have more definite information on what that calendar will look like after tonight's meeting. So any questions on events coming up? Construction seems to be moving right along with the high school annex. We're still on pace to be open up and ready to go and use that facility in the fall of 23. So students will be accessing it. I was in it last week, and they're putting up cupboards in certain rooms, and some they're just getting their drywall up and going. So it's neat to see just the process at the different stages all taking place. Highland Hills and Desert View, the board is receiving an update on how bond projects are going to impact those schools due to some unforeseen circumstances, they're having to talk about timelines. And so in my next report, I'll be able to give some specifics after tonight's board meeting about what that might look like, the impact to those buildings. Perfect day outside for spring sports to get going. Middle school kids were loving life today as we drove by track practice. They're just soaked. Anyways, it's good for them. It makes them tough. But spring sports is up and rolling. At the high school, right now we're seeing 375 kids that are out participating in spring sports, which is a wonderful figure to see. So we're excited about participation there. Baseball and softball at the middle schools are now kicking off, and so tonight is that first practice for them. Baseball is going to be, make sure I don't say this one wrong, baseball practices at Armand, and then the softball is going to be at the Field of Dreams, and so that's where the two locations will be. And then looking back, so we had wrestling finish up here, some winter sport activities, and boys and girls wrestling teams were being recognized at the board meeting tonight, just a few moments ago, where the boys placed second in state. They had 7 state placers, and the girls had 2 state placers. So first time we've had state placers on the girls program, so it's really neat to see both of them just continuing that strong performance in the wrestling programs. Along with that, both the men's and women's wrestling teams won the 3A MCC district championships, which is, again, pretty exciting, and especially for the girls program, which is a new program. Pretty neat. Dance team, they're still competing right now. They won the District 3A championships in Pasco, and they're heading to state, and that will be on March 24th. And for bowling, we had one student attend who placed 9th at the state bowling meet, or match. And that right there is what we have going on.
Sounds like there's nothing our kids can't do.
Nope, they survive rain, hail. It's good stuff.
Just another spring practice. Yep. Welcome to Eastern Oregon. So, Mr. Bacon, the high school annex.
Yeah.
Okay. Besides the high school annex, I know that there was some conversations about an indoor hitting facility. Is that still on the schedule, still on the conversation? What does that look like?
I can't speak to a timeline. I know discussions are still being had.
Okay, so they're still talking about it, nothing planned yet at this point?
There's always talk. But as far as a timeline for a completion date,
But they are moving forward on that?
no, I need to get specifics of what a timeline would look like.
Hitting?
So, this is baseball, softball, golf.
Batting cages type of
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right. John Wick action going on or something.
All right, so, yeah, I would love to hear more about
Okay.
that. Last week was also Dr. Seuss week.
That it was, and
I got to attend and read to second grade classes at Rocky Heights. I enjoyed that. I saw a couple of our public safety officers also reading over there, including our chaplain. So it was nice. Thanks for inviting us in, and really enjoyed the conversation. Really enjoyed trying to describe what a mayor does to 8-year-olds. I can't even describe it to adults. Well, good. All right. Any other questions? Yes, our student advisor.
As a student at Hermiston High School, I was wondering with the completion of this new annex, if there was also going to be implementation of parking as well. It's a very big problem at our school right now, and I just wanted to clarify it just in case.
yes.
When are they getting their parking back?
Not soon enough, I'll tell you that much right now. Yeah, once construction is ready to go, so this fall we're expecting to have in addition 200 parking spaces. So how that will look exactly, how they're going to organize who parks where, and if they're going to, how detailed they're going to become with it, hasn't been decided, but there will be an increased number of parking spaces, which has everybody really excited.
Well, up until a couple of years ago, that parking lot didn't even exist, so. Yeah, at least we have that opportunity now. to look.
Well, and it'll be nice too, with that also, Storm, is that, you know, when we're able to pull those modulars out of there, because that reduced some parking over on that side there as well. So we're gonna increase parking there, and then plus we'll also have that parking in the back as well.
Great. Did you have any more questions? Thanks for asking one, though. Might be the first. Yeah, Councilor.
Hi, Mr. Bacon. Kind of teaching right now and kind of seeing statewide how everything's going with chronic student absences. I know that having students gone, especially for long periods of time, isn't very common, or I guess isn't unique to Hermiston. I know that's going on statewide. And I know in conversations with other educators, one of the things that have been frustrating have been the school not being able to really do much about when students are just not at school. I know that the school works with the police department to try to get these students back, but until recently I know that there's no citations that can be given out to parents if they're not bringing their kids to school. So I guess, like I said, this isn't unique to our school district, unfortunately. What can be done, especially for this next year, in partnership maybe with the city and the school, to try to increase more student attendance?
So I've not been directly involved in the conversations, but I do know Dan Greeno, who's our Director of Student Services, and then Michael Thomas, who is an assistant principal at the high school. They are meeting with some folks from the county on partially through CARE, and then through Bobby Spencer will also be a part of that. She's going to facilitate, from what I understand. I don't have exact information on what that's going to look like, but I know in the upcoming weeks they are going to be meeting to discuss this topic. Just specific to the citation process, how that might look going forward. Outside of that, it comes down to one thing, and I spoke at a job fair at the last 2 weeks ago, and talked about connection and the importance of connection and helping students find that place, that belonging, wherever that may be. And we've talked about that being our number one tool in our toolbox to be able to kind of try and curb that attendance rate.
Thank you. I know that it almost feels like as a district or as a state, I think this was more of a state law. It's as if we lost kind of a tool in the tool belt to be able to really have parents, or I guess kind of force, if a student's been gone multiple times, has been dropped, at least to have some teeth, and it feels like that was just kind of removed. And originally I understood why, it's you don't want to fine parents maybe if they're going through a tough time, especially after the pandemic. But it's been tough to try to have some of that more of that responsibility back on the parent to make sure that the kids come to school, just to be frank.
I was a building principal during the time when we did work through those processes and have used that. And I'll still advocate today that the best avenue is a connection with those families and with those kids to get in there. Yes, it's nice to have that backup, going that direction, but it shouldn't be a go-to, and I don't know that it provided the positive impact that we needed, even during that time.
Appreciate it, Mr. Bacon, and I appreciate your perspective too. I think it's a very important one, and I look forward to the discussions that you have as a school district, and hopefully to see what we can do to help out these kiddos.
Yeah, I think the bottom line, if kids aren't getting the education they deserve, and they aren't present to learn that education, it's hard to teach them that education. It's also hard to hold teachers accountable to that education when the kids are failing because they're not showing up. And so it's tough on everybody engaged in the education process. And as a state, demonstrated by our last reading score records, not good. So the state will need to do better. Yeah. So I look forward to that future conversation too. So thanks for your perspective. Other comments, questions for Mr. Bacon? Yes, Stormy, another one. Right on.
Okay, with the attendance issue going on from a Hermiston High School student perspective, we have initiated these quote-unquote hallway sweeps that have occurred. I'm sure you know of them, Mr. Bacon. I was actually caught up in one, not because I'm a bad student, but because I was 5 minutes late because I couldn't find any parking.
Every one of them said the same thing.
It's so crazy, I'll tell you. But it's like, with this lecture that they give, it was almost very, like, felt very subjected and almost like degraded as a student. I was very upset with the situation going on because I had just made it to my classroom and I had a test that period. And I was stressing about it in that auditorium, and I'll admit I was crying. But it was almost a very bad experience to me, on all honesty. And I think that Mr. Bacon saying that connection is what is needed is extremely important, because during that lecture and everything, I felt there was no connection at all. There were questions asked, but we as students were not allowed to respond. It was very, very degrading, and I walked out of that auditorium not feeling very good, and I failed that test. So I definitely wanted to let you guys know, as in the city council, that that kind of thing was a problem, and I feel like they should be able to improve on it. Yeah, so I was just letting you guys know.
Well, Stormy, I'll follow up with you outside of this, but when I do, I would like, my question I'm going to ask is what avenues do you have to provide feedback, and how can we support that? So.
Good.
Thank you.
I think there's always opportunities for our organizations to learn and grow and do better, so appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
I would like for you to explain, what is the hallway sweep? What is it about? This is the first time I've ever heard that.
My understanding of the hallway sweeps are after a certain day, identify a day, and then students that are not in class after the bell has rang, they do a sweep of the halls and collect those students. And then I haven't seen the content, but they meet with students and go over a series of questions and information, which when I reach out, I can find out more information from Stormy. But that's the process to go over, focusing on being in class on time, is my understanding.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Bacon? All right. It's always a pleasure, Mr. Bacon. Oh, yes, we do have another question, Ms. Peterson.
Just from an ADA standpoint, if a student were to be caught up in one of those sweeps, do you have any sort of like if a student, say, had a disability that meant that they had to be late for some reason, let's say they had to use the facility or something like that, are there any, like, here, this way I don't have to stop and explain myself, passes of that variety, or anything that has been considered of that nature? Because you know, that's something that I encounter with my students on a regular basis, and I can tell you that these are adults that I work with, and having them talk about it, it's humiliating. So I can only imagine what high schoolers must encounter if they would be caught up in a sweep and they had to, you know, be late due to an ADA-related reason. And so I'm just wondering if the various intricacies of that human component has been thought of.
So I cannot speak to specific and say that they do have a pass, but I do know that we have our processes in place to support our students with accommodations. So rather that's transition times, coming and going from lunch, and before and after school. Not sitting in on a tardy sweep, I have not. I can't speak to the specifics of it, but I do know what it is, being in the building with the 504s and the supports for students.
Well, Mr. Bacon, as a private employer, I can speak to the importance of punctuality and being on time, and it seems to be a skill set we're missing lately in a lot of our younger generation. And so I applaud you for trying to encourage kids to show up to class on time and show up every day. So whatever we can do to encourage that thought process, I would support. So thank you, Mr. Bacon. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for coming and speaking to us.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
Yeah, have a good evening. All right, we are going to move on now to citizen input. Our first opportunity in our agenda for citizen input.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is where we wanted
I'm
to have
sorry.
12C.
Sarah, we did move 12C, so wait on your citizen input. You're important. We want to hear from you. But we did change our agenda so that 12C, which is now review and prioritization of council goals, was moved up. So, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I'll just ask Sarah to continue in her process.
Welcome back, Sarah.
Yes. Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This is an opportunity to prioritize the goals or the actions and the goal areas that you set during your 2023 City Council goal setting. And I've revised the goals based on the conversation from the work session. So you will see those in the poll. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, and you should have received a link to join the online polling session. And just to provide everybody with an understanding of the purpose of the polling is to help staff understand the council's priorities so that as they develop their organizational work plan and develop the 2023-2024 budget, that they understand kind of the order and level of importance for each of these actions, and they can take that data point along with data around just existing progress on these goals and resources and other things as they think about how to approach the work. So that's the purpose of the prioritization. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the results of the polling. So the first question here is to just share your name. So this just helps me to confirm that everybody is in the poll before I advance the slides and you guys get into prioritizing those actions. And is everyone present tonight, just so I know how many to look for?
Yes.
Okay, great.
The guy that can't log into his computer.
Can you log in on your phone to that email?
Yes.
All right, great. So we have everybody. So the first goal area is in line with the 4 vision goal areas. So we'll go through 4 of these slides where you will prioritize these actions. And so the one that you prioritize as being first is the one you consider the highest priority. So I'll let you guys go ahead and rank these, and as people start submitting their options, you guys will see a live result of the poll. Will show up here on the screen. We're just waiting on 2 more submittals and then we'll move to the next one. Okay, we just need 1 more.
Counselor Harden, you submit?
Yes.
Did everyone submit?
Yes. Yeah, we're all sitting here doing nothing, so I'm guessing we're all submitting.
Oh, all right. It looks like 1 didn't come through, but if that's okay, we'll keep going. Again, I can't see you guys. You can see me, but I can't see you, so you just gotta let me know. Okay, so the next full area is around safe and healthy. We've got 5 to prioritize here. So again, if you reach it, I'm watching down here in the corner to see when it gets to mine. All right, looks like I have 8. Did everybody submit?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine messed up.
All right. Next one then is sustainable. Again, 5 options here.
all completed?
You're muted.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, it wouldn't let me take myself off of mute. Okay, great. So we have all of the results from the polling exercise. I will send a copy of those results to staff and they can distribute them. As far as next steps, if there aren't any other questions, we will get your summary report put together for you that will have, as you're accustomed to receiving in the past, that just documents the process that we went through and has the final goals and actions with your prioritization data included. And we'll get that to you and you guys will be off and running, ready to implement your goals. Any other questions?
Sarah, so as a matter of prioritization, we prioritized within the groups, but we didn't prioritize overall. Is that part of this process, or is that going to be left up to administration on how they feel they could implement?
Yeah, I found that typically it hasn't been beneficial for groups to do the overall prioritization because there's just the way the resources get allocated and the different groupings. And so typically with groups, we don't do that. We have them just do them within the specific goal areas. If you guys want to go through that exercise, I could probably quickly put something together so you could prioritize them with all of the actions. But I think that this gives staff the data points that they need to work through within each goal area, how to approach the work. Again, there's other pieces of data that go into working through how these things get planned out and resources get allocated.
Mr. Smith, do you feel like this is going to provide you with enough information?
Yeah, I think so. I think with the limited number of areas, we can work within that with the prioritization that was done.
Okay. Any other council comments?
That was cool.
What's that?
That was cool.
Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that. Thank you, Sarah. That's pretty
Yeah, good.
All
Well, I hope, I find that it's more beneficial to have a chance to kind of revise the goals than to do it right away in the session so that you can truly see what you're prioritizing. So we'll get that report ready for you and have it over to you in the next couple weeks.
As far as a legality process, so normally we can't do a secret ballot voting. So we'll be able to identify how everybody voted on this, or does it even matter on this case?
Yeah, maybe Sarah's had some
You will
experience.
have that. You will have that data because this isn't like an official vote of anything. It's just polling. So from a legal perspective, when I've done this with other cities, it hasn't been an issue. But you will have the data that I sent when I send it to staff as far as how different people ranked it.
Yeah, I guess I was asking my city attorney specifically about the law and making sure that we're clear of any violations. This process, because it wasn't like an open vote process, it wasn't anything that we're not taking action on tonight, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any issue with that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other council comments, thoughts?
In regards to that, I think that's it comes up similar to like when we do this, when we put the dots up, we don't name who's on what dot. We use the yellow and number 1s and 2s and 3s, so I think we'll be okay.
And we can, put that information that she sends us in the minutes, so it could be reflected.
Perfect. Any public comment about the process, review and prioritization of our council goals?
Yeah, you might want to make the printing.
You gotta, I'm sorry, sir, you're gonna have to come up to the microphone up front. Introduce yourself by name and address, please.
Yes, Terry,
Yes, Terry.
910 South Townsend Road, Hermiston, Oregon.
Yes,
Next
yes,
time when she does that, you might want to make the printing big enough people can read it.
yeah.
Everybody's squinting trying to read it.
Yeah, so was it too small on either of those?
Very small.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll work on our
We'll work on the technology.
visibility of that technology. Anything else for Sarah? Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate the process again.
All right. Yes, thank you, everyone, and good luck as you move towards your implementation.
Okay, have a good evening.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda for this evening. We're at our citizen input on non-agenda items. So if there are citizens here this evening that would like to speak to the council, please come up to the microphone up front, like Mr. Terry just did. Introduce yourself by name and address and direct your comments to me.
Yes, Terry again, same address. I just had a question. Right on the corner of Diagonal Road and Elm Avenue, there is a fire hydrant. It's been hit like 3 times since they put it in. It was bent clear over and they just straightened it today. And I was wondering if they have any plans of putting like any ballards in front of that, because that corner slopes right to the fire hydrant, and every time it gets icy, a car ends up right up against it. And so I was surprised that they didn't move it back or to one side away from that corner, because it's just going to get wiped out again and again and again and again if they don't do something to it.
What was the address?
It's right on the corner of Elm at Diamond Run, at the corner of that new subdivision they just put in. And that whole corner slopes, so anybody coming into town on Diagonal, on Elm, and turns onto Diagonal, ends up in that ditch if they're not familiar with the corner. And so I was just wondering if there was any plans of putting any ballards in front of the fire hydrant, so they hit the ballards before they take the fire hydrant out, because it's just slowly been knocked over until it was a pretty good angle, and they just fixed it today.
Okay.
But I was surprised they didn't move it back from the corner, because it's like 4 feet off the asphalt.
Well, thank you for your feedback. We'll look into it and try to address it. Thank you for that information. Mr. Smith, did you need any more information on that?
No.
Okay. Any other public comment this evening? Okay, we're going to move on to our consent agenda items. Item 8A through C. Are any of those needing to be removed? Okay, seeing none. Is there any public comment on agenda items 8A, B, or C? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items A through C?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Duran, seconded by Councilor McCarthy, that we approve consent agenda items as presented, A, B, and C. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. No items removed, so we move on to number 10, public hearing. Home Run Land LLC has requested latecomer assessment in conjunction with public improvements installed as part of the Diamond Run subdivision. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest from the council? No. The hearing guidelines will now be presented by city staff. I'm guessing that's why Mr. Spencer moved up here. He's up today.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit on the agenda tonight. City Council is holding a public hearing for Home Run Land LLC as they have requested latecomer assessments in conjunction with public improvements installed as part of the Diamond Run subdivision. City Council will take public testimony on this issue and make a decision at this meeting. The hearing process will begin with a staff report followed by public testimony. Council requests that all people wishing to testify give their name and mailing address before testifying. People wishing to testify should limit testimony to not more than 5 minutes unless a longer period is provided by City Council. Written testimony will also be accepted. After everyone wishing to testify has had an opportunity to speak, the City Council will close the public hearing and enter deliberations. Once the public hearing is closed, no further testimony will be received.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. We're going to open up the hearing, and city staff will now present its report.
Okay, I wanted to just introduce Joshua Locke from Anderson Perry. He's a city engineer. He's been helping out on the project, and we actually have 2 latecomer hearings tonight. And so I wanted to provide just some baseline information that will apply to both hearings. The Hermiston Municipal Code contains multiple provisions for reimbursement of development costs when infrastructure improvements benefit properties beyond the development itself. So a line, for instance, may be installed in an existing street, but the development is entirely on one side of the street, and there are unserved properties on the side opposite the development. That might be a time when a reimbursement might be placed because there's benefiting property that haven't yet connected to the line and someone else bore the cost. Additionally, a line may be oversized and provide additional capacity for property owners downstream in the future. The right to collect assessments on sewer infrastructure is in 51006, which permits the city to enter into reimbursement agreements for sewer main construction, which oversizes or which benefits other property. And for water construction, it's in 5215, which has very similar language. And additionally, our zoning ordinance in 157-164F establishes the city's authority to enter into reimbursement agreements with the developer. Full text of that is on page 24 of your packet. There's a paragraph that just talks about how we determine those things. For the first hearing tonight, we're talking about Diamond Run development, and you have a map in your staff report as well as up on the screens. Sometimes lasers work, lasers do not work. Okay. The triangular piece in the upper left corner is the Diamond Run development. And then the large, thank you, Lily. And the large property immediately south of that is property owned by the school district. There is a very small wedge directly east of Diamond Run, which is owned by Home Run Land, who's actually the developer. And then there are 2 additional properties that have been identified on Townsend Road. So those are the properties that we're looking at in tonight's hearing. Diamond Run, when they went in, constructed water and sewer improvements in diagonal, which the applicant states will benefit other properties. When you look at the map, you will see a dashed blue line. That represents the water line in diagonal. And then there's a dashed green line, which only goes a little ways, and that represents the sewer line in diagonal. Basically, the 12-inch water line was extended from Northeast 10th all the way to Elm and has capacity to service future development because of the oversizing. And then the sewer line installed in East Diagonal extends just about 1,000 feet to the intersection of Diagonal and Northeast 11th Street. The total cost that's eligible for water improvements is $89,491, and sewer development totals out to $126,376. These totals are half of the cost of the installed improvement because the development itself, as I mentioned, benefits from these installed improvements. So they derive what is determined as generally half the benefit, and then the remaining half is apportioned among other properties that may benefit in the future. 2 of the properties which the developer has requested an assessment are outside the city limits and will also require annexation at a future date to be eligible for a connection. At this time, no connections are proposed, nor is any annexation proposed. These are the properties that are on Townsend Road. And it's important to remember that reimbursement assessments are future assessments, which are only collected when a property actually makes a physical connection to the installed infrastructure. If no connection is made, no assessment is ever collected. To kind of give you a feel for that, it's fun to think about the school district property, which is already receiving sewer and water service from Northeast 10th Street. So there is an assessment that's proposed, but if the school district never makes the connection, there would never be an assessment collected. The school district is the largest assessor or assessment recipient, which has a sewer assessment of $126,000 and a water assessment of $73,000. And I'm trying to think, Josh, if there's anything we need to talk about from a benefits standpoint. Basically, when you read the city engineer's memo, there's really two types of benefit that we can think about. There is actual benefit and then there's potential benefit. And actual benefit would be like the school district property or the home run land property, which are physically abutting the properties now. But under Oregon law and under case law, there's also potential benefit, which means the line has become closer than it is today as a result of this construction. So there is potentially less cost to connect in the future. So that's your potential benefit. And so really what the city council is considering tonight is whether or not to agree or disagree with the determination of benefiting properties that were agreed upon by the developer and staff, and see if the properties that are in your staff report sorry, I appear to have deleted my note where I referenced the page. Oh, page 24, here it is. On page 24 of your packet is a table that has all of the assessments on it. And if the council were to agree with those assessments after the public hearing, then the staff would prepare a resolution for the next meeting, or depending on what the council agrees, we would modify depending on council decision as a result of public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. We're going to have opportunity for the council to ask questions here in a little bit. So we will have public testimony. So people wishing to speak are asked to come up to the microphone up front, introduce themselves by name and mailing address, limit your testimony to 5 minutes. And we'll start with the proponents. Any neutral parties? Any opponents? Okay, the hearing is now closed. Okay.
We're here for a reason.
I'm sorry, I don't know who you are.
I know.
So you're speaking as a proponent, opponent, or neutral? Opponent, okay.
Janet Terry, 910 South Townsend Road. That's that little bitty square. Underneath that other square, like they said, we are in the county. My family's owned that for 5 generations. I really doubt it'll ever be part of the city, because when I called down to talk to the city planning person, she told me that they never annex into the city unless we request it. Now, is that true?
So I'm not going to answer that question legally.
Well, I don't.
I'll ask the attorney to answer that, but, or Mr. Smith?
Yeah, that's been our practice, is that there is a process that could take place under the law that we could attempt to annex land that has not been requested. The city, in my knowledge, has not done that in the past, or
it has been long-standing policy of the council not to do annexations that are not.
Well, and I probably assume that. I mean, it's been in our family for 5 generations. It's over 80 years, and it's never been annexed into the city, and we really have a hard time with Townsend Road, because the county doesn't want to deal with it and the city doesn't want to deal with it when it comes to police and all that stuff. So we really didn't understand what was going on. We got the letter, we read it. It says within 10 years if we hook up to it, then the person that's developed it would get the money, but after 10 years the city would get the money. So either way, it's going to come out of our pocket if we were to hook up to that. And you can see it's quite a ways away. We're not even really close, so I don't even know why they included us with that. And at that point, 10 years from now, 65, 75, it would probably be my kids. So anyway, we're kind of opposed to it. So
Thank you.
we really don't understand the process because we've never been part of the city. And what.
If you have further questions, you're always welcome to come down and talk to the planning department. You can
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your testimony this evening. Any others that I missed? Public testimony. Okay, we will now close the hearing. Is there any further council discussion? So a couple questions that came to mind that I had is in the assessment, how do you come up with who gets a assessed what? I mean, what percentage? Is it just based on square foot of the property, adjourning it, or?
In this case, there are two ways that you can do it. You can do it based off of straight front footage, or you can do it off of total acreage. In this case, there is the total cost of, $89,000 that was apportionable and was then divided up among the total acreage that is subject to the assessment. So it wound up being about $1,000 an acre. So the Terry's property has, just a second, pull that table up. 42. Yeah, about 4,200. And I think the other property that's directly north of them was about 9,000.
A little over 10, but yeah.
A little over 10, okay.
So, but they don't touch the current pipe, so they're
They do not.
potential partners.
They are potential
Okay,
because.
so do they get assessed less than somebody that has an adjoining?
At this rate, everybody was assessed equally, using the formula that we developed.
And I would imagine it's really super hard to predict. Say, for instance, the sports fields were sold and a apartment complex went in there. The utilization of that property, obviously they're going to use more water and sewer, and so their percentage probably should be greater than if it just stays a big vacant lot, right? So I guess it would be really hard to assess what's going to happen in the future, right? So trying to develop a fair process coming down to square footage and acreage is probably about as fair as you can be, other than adjoining versus potential. You may create some sort of segmentation in that.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that in other policies?
This is something the city doesn't do very often, and the last time we did it was about 2002, and that was done strictly as a front footage basis. It's permissible under the law to do it on area. This is the first time we have done it, and I did not make any contact with other cities to see how they had done that.
What other questions? Councilor Myers?
Yeah, I don't understand how the Hermiston School District plays into this. They are already hooked up to water and sewer, so if they put a new building, is that what this is?
It would, in the school district's case, and in the Townsend Road case, it's only if they tie on to anything descending from the diagonal line. So for instance, on Townsend Road, there are sewer and water lines south of those lots on Townsend Road. So they could theoretically tie onto those in the future as lines extend north in Townsend, in which case this assessment wouldn't be collected.
And completely avoid this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And with diagonal, yes, they're already tied on. And so there's very little likelihood that the school district is going to have this. However, like our Parks Master Plan calls for a potential soccer fields and stuff along the diagonal frontage, that would most likely see service off of diagonal. So if the school district were to, say, sell off some of the area between the ditch and diagonal road and want to develop that residentially or something, then this assessment would come in.
So you had mentioned this earlier, but I just want to be clear. There is no fee or anything being assessed tonight.
Right.
Okay, this would be, should somebody in the future hook up to this line, this landowner or developer could go back and assess the property that hooks on to their system that they created or helped create.
The basic logic is that developers install a piece of infrastructure. And in a lot of cases, they're only developing one side of the street. So, they paid $100 a foot to put in this line or whatever the cost is, but they're only getting that benefit of essentially $50 a foot. And the other half of that cost can be apportioned out as a latecomer to the other property owners so that they can recoup that investment that basically they were only getting half the benefit of.
Seems fair. Did we ask them to build at a certain size?
Yes.
Okay, was that based on what they planned to develop in there, or did we ask them to upsize it for future development?
We asked them to upsize from 8 to 12, and then we covered the difference between the 8 and the 12.
Okay, so we did help pay for the piping. Does the city get reimbursed in any of this process?
And I'll just include that piping sizes are largely determined by the water system master plan that the city has. So they weren't just pulled out of kind of like a good guess. There was a lot of thought that went into making sure the right sizes of pipe were in the right places for future development.
So we have a 20-year master plan that shows that potentially that area will develop, and so we need the piping to feed that system. Okay. Yes, Councilor Marsh?
Just to be clear, these people and these assessments can only be assessed if they tap into this specific.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Correct.
That's correct.
And annex and all, whatever they may have to do. But
Yes.
they have to initiate this.
Yes.
Councilor Peterson saw her hand first.
Okay, so you're gonna have to pardon the simpleton comparison. So this would be like somebody putting in a fence and we, the city, paid for them to make it a particular thickness. And if somebody next door buys a dog that needs to be fenced in, they're gonna have to pay the fence owner because the fence is helping them?
That's a good way of looking at it, yeah.
And the city just did them a favor by making the fence big enough to keep the dog in?
Well, we actually have a policy established. We have a minimum size. It's always 8 inches. We require all public infrastructure, sewer and water lines always have to be 8 inches. If our master plan, based on how the pressure zones work out, where pumps might be in the future, where storage is going to be, how land is going to develop, you have certain things that are going to be trunk lines in the future that are going to need to carry more. So we always say, developer, you have to install an 8. But in this case, you have to install a 12 because the city needs a 12 and we don't want to have 2 pipes running in the middle. And so essentially you pay the developer to make it big enough to handle all of your demand.
But the developer isn't going to get paid back for that upcharge.
Yeah, because they only need an 8 to service their own development, but
They
we
only
need
paid
a
for an
12. I'm
Right.
sorry?
They only paid for an 8.
Yeah,
So they don't get the full cost of the 12,
right.
right, back.
Yeah, and the reimbursement assessment for this one and for the next one are both recouping costs on an 8, not a 12.
Okay, thank you.
That was where I was going with that, because if we were gonna be, we were paying them to supersize it, and they were getting the money from that. Yeah, I was just making sure that was not the case, because I would have a problem with that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, good discussion. So now for council action this evening, motion to adopt the assessment. Is that the right process, Mr. Smith? Yes.
Yes, and
Okay.
then we would bring that back in a resolution form for the official adoption, but this
Okay.
just gives us direction that you agree with the proposals.
Okay. So can I get a motion to adopt the assessment as requested? So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Primer, seconded by Councilor Myers? No, Councilor Linton. I knew it came from over there somewhere. I heard Duran. I heard both of you, so. Seconded by Councilor Linton, that we approve motion, or we adopt the motion, that we made a motion to adopt the assessment as requested. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. On to the second one of these evening. Eastern Oregon Development LLC has requested latecomer assessments in conjunction with public improvements installed as part of the Hermiston mini storage project on East Elm Avenue. Any conflicts of interest, council? Hearing guidelines will now be presented by city staff.
City Council is holding a public hearing for Eastern Oregon Development LLC as they have requested latecomer assessments in conjunction with public improvements installed as part of the Hermiston mini storage project on East Elm Avenue. City Council will take public testimony on this issue and make a decision at this meeting. The hearing process will begin with the staff report followed by public testimony. Council requests that all people wishing to testify give their name and mailing address before testifying. People wishing to testify should limit testimony to not more than 5 minutes unless a longer period is provided by the City Council. Written testimony will be accepted. After everyone wishing to testify has had an opportunity to speak, the City Council will close the hearing and enter deliberations. Once the public hearing is closed, no further testimony will be received.
Okay, we are going to open the hearing and we will start with the staff report.
Okay, this is very similar to the previous hearing. In this case, Eastern Oregon Development LLC has constructed a new water line on East Elm Avenue, which the developer states will benefit other properties. A 12-inch water line was extended from Northeast 4th Street eastward approximately 1,300 feet to the end of the development area. This line has capacity to service additional development east of the site. In order to reach the mini storage site, Eastern Oregon Development had to extend the line past 2 unserved dwellings to reach their property. Those are the 2 in the upper left corner. And then past several unserved properties on the south side of East Elm Avenue. All of the properties potentially benefiting from the water line directly abut the newly installed line. So a little different than the previous hearing. Water improvement that is eligible for reimbursement totals $27,713. This total is half the complete cost of improvement because the development itself also benefits from the improvements. And there's a table on page 31 of your packet that lists the proposed assessment for each benefiting lot and denotes if the property is inside or outside city limits. In this assessment, the city is the largest assessed property because we have the public works yard, that's tax lot 202 on your property. Future construction at Public Works, if we ever build an additional street building or anything, may very well necessitate a new water connection to this line on Elm. All reimbursements are future assessments, which are only collected when a property makes a physical connection to the installed infrastructure. If no connection is made, no assessment is collected. City Council may choose to agree or disagree with the determination of benefiting properties and set assessments. Assessments are set by resolution of the City Council, and should the Council agree that subject properties are benefiting, we will prepare a assessment resolution for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to open it up for public testimony. So people that would like to speak in favor of, we'll ask you to come up to the microphone up front and introduce yourself by name and address, and limit your testimony to 5 minutes. Are there people that wish to speak in favor? Any neutral parties? Any proponents? I'm sorry, opponents?
John Eckhart, 288 Southeast 11th Street.
Welcome.
So I just have some questions specifically in relationship to how the assessment was put together. So I didn't have time to read the documents and get to your office to ask questions, and I had to do it publicly now. So here we are. So it's basically what your guys' assessment was, upsizing the cost. So that value, that cost to increase from an 8-inch to a 12-inch line is what we're talking about, assessing the properties along those areas for reimbursement?
No, it would actually be the other way around. We have not yet reimbursed the developer for the difference between the 8 and the 12, but Mr. Morgan is working on that. And that will be out shortly because the water line hadn't been accepted by the water department until last week. And so the difference between the 8 and the 12 is essentially off the table. This is purely the cost of the physical pipe and installation for 8 inches of water line.
Okay. So that's confusing to me because I thought that the whole arrangement was that the upcharge was going to be reimbursed to the developer.
Right, the city will reimburse the upcharge, and it is not in the calculation of these assessments.
Okay.
So the front footage charge is based on
just the 8-inch.
The 8-inch itself. H.D. Fowler in this case submitted bids for a 12-inch installation with all the pipe, and then a bid for the 8-inch installation and all the pipe.
Mr. Eckhart, do you have a comment?
Well, I just was surprised that, I thought I was being the friendly neighbor guy, allowing the development to go right through my property. I'm on the corner there, and I wasn't aware I was going to be hit with an extra cost for that. So I was a little bit surprised.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to be hit unless you annex it.
Well, and I will have to, because the property is going to have to be annexed into the city fairly soon. So, because of some other issues I've got with the property.
Those tax lots 700 and 800 in the upper left corner both granted an easement to the developer. So because ODOT would not allow the water line to be constructed in the Highway 207 right away.
So anyway, I guess that answers my questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other opponents, comments?
Can I speak as a proponent?
Yep, you can rebuttal. Absolutely.
So, I'm Steve Richards, I'm the developer, the owner of Hermiston Mini Storage. Actually, John was my general contractor for Nerd Construction. I'd recommend him if he needs a project done, but I could not have got that done without that easement. I didn't even realize, I didn't even think about this coming to fruition here. So I'd just say that I think I would collect the latecomers, so if it happens in the first 10 years, I don't mind waiving that for him, because I couldn't have got the project done otherwise. But I can't speak till, I think after 10 years, then it goes towards the city, right?
That's correct.
So I think I can help you out in the first 10 years. After that, I probably can't do much.
Yeah, how about you guys talk out in the... Figure it out. Thank you for your input. Any other comments? Yes, come on.
I'm Dahlia.
Are you in opponent?
Opponent, yeah.
Okay.
So address is 678 East.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Dahlia Villegas.
Thank you, Dahlia.
Address is 678 East Elm Avenue. I am inquiring the property tax lot 101, Hepler. So we are going to be connecting the water service to that property soon. Can the assessment fee be negotiated to half the price?
We don't have that ability. Again, that would be something that would have to be negotiated with the developer. It would only be if the council felt that a per foot cost was not the appropriate way to go. In this case, this is half the cost of the line assessed on a per foot for installation cost basis.
Okay. Okay.
So where would I be able to go after that to apply for that? Or?
The developer actually is Mr. Richards, who just spoke.
Okay. So we'll have a discussion
Making connections
after this
tonight for
meeting.
Mr. Richards.
Yeah.
Any other opponents? Okay. All right, we are going to close the hearing. And now council discussion. The question I had about this one has to do more with attaching to this beyond his property. So what about all those properties to the east that potentially will hook onto this at some point? How do they not have to be held accountable to?
You know, we have always in the past interpreted benefiting property to be those that are directly benefiting. So when we entered into this agreement with the developer, we identified properties that were not connected now and had the potential to connect in the future, and said these are budding properties, these are benefiting under all of our codes. With the previous hearing, the developer actually raised the issue that potential benefit is also an issue. We had never interpreted it that way before. Research with our legal counsel said, yes, that is a completely valid way to do that, but it was something that the city had not done in the past. And so we did not raise potential downstream benefits with this developer as we were negotiating this. Both of these were done several years ago.
So this was something that the developer asked
Yes.
for? Okay. And this developer did not?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
From a technical perspective, one of the reasons the city has always done it on a directly benefiting basis is because it's really easy to tell who's directly benefiting. As soon as you start saying who's potentially benefiting, it's very difficult to figure out where to draw the line. And so that's why it's hard to make it fair.
A lot of potential
It's
upstream.
been a lot more straightforward to just do it to directly abutting properties.
It's a valid way to go, because if you have something like a water tower, you can say this serves a basin. And it's very, we know the pressure line based on contours is going to be here, and we could say all 400 properties in that are below that contour area would be potential benefiters, and each one should pay in a little bit. With a line, it's a lot less easy to say where the potential benefit is. And so that's why you wouldn't want to take that tool out of your toolbox to say potential benefit isn't something that you would want to assess, but make it very clear with lines at least that directly abutting is where your benefit is.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt the assessments as requested? So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCarthy, seconded by Councilor Myers. I did close the hearing, right? That was a question that was raised by Councilor Hermiston. Okay. So there's been a motion and a second. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Are you guys done, or we still got more for you guys?
That's all for now.
Okay,
And
thank
we're
you.
later in the agenda.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. All right, resolution 2261, award construction contract for East Penny Avenue extension. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Morgan.
Mr. Morgan?
All right, so council will remember about springtime last year, we came and asked for the opportunity to leverage some of our ARPA funding that we received from the federal government to use as a match against a immediate opportunity fund grant opportunity through Business Oregon to accomplish and build out some more of our South Hermiston Industrial Park plan. So you can see this map shows the kind of pink line there. That is a proposed extension of East Penny Avenue from Kelly Boulevard past Ranch and Home and connecting up to Highway 395. And so Business Oregon awarded us that grant funding up to a little under $600,000 to do the project on a 50-50 reimbursement basis. We made our ARPA dollars available as match, again on a 50-50 reimbursement basis. And so we spent most of last year finalizing some right-of-way acquisition for that Penny Avenue extension and finalized that in December. Anderson Perry finished the design through December and January. We put the project out to bid, and we actually received 10 bids last week. So it was a very competitive bid process. And so we received the lowest responsible bidder was James Dean Construction to do the project for $535,000. So the request for you this evening is to award the contract to James Dean Construction. Moving forward, the timeline would be construction would probably begin here in late spring into the summer and probably wrapping up in early fall.
Okay, council comments? So the only question I had, did we still have to do the 50% match?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we weren't able to save any of those ARPA dollars?
No, yeah, it's very similar to like with our South Hermiston Industrial Park project where we got a 50% grant from EDA. If the costs come in lower, then the grant follows the cost.
Okay, so then we don't get the full amount?
We don't get the full amount from our Business Oregon grant. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Councilor Lutton?
I would like to know, have we used them before?
Have we used?
Work in Hermiston, James Dean. Do you want to award their?
I'm not sure. I mean, prior to maybe 10 years ago, I don't know how long they've been around, but at least the last 10 years, I haven't seen them do a project for the city of Hermiston.
All of our bid recipients or bid proposals have to qualify. Is that fair, accurate?
Yeah, so Anderson Perry, what they do when they get the bids, they always announce the apparent low bidder, and then they go back through and they verify all of the quantities and check to make sure that what they're bidding is going to be an appropriate bid.
So I think the question has to do with, making sure that they're gonna do good work, right? And making sure that they're responsible bidder and that they can qualify and make sure that this project gets done. But we have processes in place to prohibit bad faith bids, or people that can't perform or perform poorly.
Correct.
Other questions? Yeah, Councilman McCarthy.
I'm just curious if it's common in projects like this for there to be over $100,000 difference from an estimate to a bid, because that's substantial.
Yeah, it happens. It happened on our South Hermiston Industrial Park project. That one came in $1 million below the original estimate, so.
That's even bigger.
Yeah, and this is one, I think one of the, probably the biggest reason why it came in lower was because, when we're looking at, running some cost estimates for developing a roadway and those types of things, a lot of times there are certain assumptions for comparable projects that have been, this project, similar to the roadway work that we did in the South Hermiston Industrial Park project, very simple. The soils up there are very just sandy topsoil, really not a lot of utilities, those types of things in the way. So it's a really very simple project. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the contractors to experience some savings.
I think the environment in which the bid actually goes out, how busy are contractors right now, and then also fuel prices, probably when they originally did the estimate, they're $6 a gallon or whatever, and there's a lot of petroleum that goes into asphalt, as well as the construction process. So now that fuel's come down, there's probably significant savings there too. So yeah, there's a lot of things I think that play into this. Good to see that it's on the favorable side.
It's good to see we got 10 bidders.
Absolutely. That's not always the case. In the last few years, we haven't had that many, so it's nice to see. Any other questions? Okay. Any public comment on Resolution 2261? Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt Resolution 2261 laid upon the record?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Councilor Primer, seconded by Councilor John. Or adopt Resolution 2261 laid upon the record. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Presentation discussion of the preliminary findings regarding a potential North Highway 395 urban renewal area. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, so this will bring up Mr. Spencer again, but I'll give a brief introduction. So a number of months ago, we talked with the council about a potential connection between 4th Street and the highway, Highway 395 in the area of the former Campbell's Rogers Toyota lot. And, the potential for different financing methods, all those types of things. And because right now we're sitting right before a lot of potential development in that area, we wanted to give you an update and kind of get some direction as to where we might go next. So, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you. Yeah, back in 2019, some of you may remember that we held a workshop to consider future development of the North Highway 395 corridor. And specifically, we were looking at several options for off-highway circulation, doing potentially roads behind the theater, connecting to Home Depot, connecting 4th Street to Highway 395. And we were looking at how best to fund these improvements. Subsequently, 2 years ago, Byron and I worked with a student team from Portland State University to further look at these circulation improvements, and we did some public workshops, some stakeholder interviews, things like that. And the top recommendation that came out of the fund refinement study was creating a new east-west street that would connect Highway 395 right at the Home Depot driveway and extend eastward to Northeast 4th Street, tying in at Aspen Drive. There we go. The conceptual PSU layout is on page 39 of your packet. I've also put it up on the screen. And in discussions with ODOT, Hermiston Irrigation District, and Anderson Perry, it's likely that this proposed layout that you're seeing now may shift southward just slightly more to run along the Hermiston drain for a portion of the run. Right now, it's about 100 feet off the drain center line, and that kind of leaves some difficult to develop property in the future. So if we can get it to follow the drain tie in at Home Depot's driveway and tie in at Aspen Drive, we think we'll have a lot more usable land in the future. And frankly, the proposed redevelopment of the Rogers Toyota Campbell Motor site by Good Shepherd is an opportunity for pursuing and constructing this alternative street connection. Basically, a new east-west street will relieve congestion and calm traffic in the Elm to Theater Lane corridor. Basically, that is the busiest section of highway in all of Region 5 for ODOT, and Elm and 395 is the busiest intersection in the region. And we've been working with Good Shepherd as soon as they announced they were buying the property, and they are a willing partner in the street planning process, and they see benefit to developing their property to have a street connection and potentially a new signal here at the Home Depot driveway. And so we're seeking feedback from council tonight, providing direction where we go next. When we were first looking at these alternate circulation plans back in 2019, we looked at two funding streams. One would be forming an urban renewal district, and the second would be forming a local improvement district. The difference being a local improvement district, the city pays all of the infrastructure costs up front and then assesses those costs to properties that would be considered benefiting from street connection or signal connection. Urban renewal district takes the assessed value within an area and then freezes that property tax value today, and then as the tax increment and assessed value in that district increases over time, that is used to fund these improvements. So on the screen, have the proposed area that we'd be looking at for the North Urban Renewal District. It has several parcels that are either vacant now or able to redevelop, the biggest parcel being the 10-acre wedge that's between the Hermiston Drain and north of Walmart. But there are some other parcels north of Old West Credit Union, for instance, and we know that there's a Popeyes coming to the intersection of Oregon Avenue and 395 in the near future. So there is some ability to increase value in the district over time. If you assume a no-build scenario and just a 3% growth, using this boundary, our economists with Johnson Economics have determined that a no-build scenario and 3% growth, we should see roughly 5 to 6 million in assessed value and bonding capacity over a 20-year lifespan for an urban renewal district. So if we tailor a conservative urban renewal district to this transportation project, which has a projected cost in today's dollars of about $4 million, the funding is there to do it. And so what we're asking tonight is there merit in pursuing the necessary documents to form an urban renewal district? We have to have a plan, we have to have a report, we have to run that through public hearings. It does require quite a bit of outlay on the part of the city, about $40,000 in document prep. If we go through that, you're not obligated to form an urban renewal district, but these documents have to be prepared in order to decide whether or not we want to go down that road. And so Byron and Mark and I were all looking for feedback on whether an urban renewal district and doing a third one is the right path or not.
It seems like, up until about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, urban renewal districts were kind of foreign to the city of Hermiston. Now we've seen 3 proposed in the last 10 years. So I guess, proving to the community that there's a value and a benefit, I think, is important. Because essentially the difference is, we're taking a deferred taxation and paying for a public resource versus making the adjoining property owners pay for that resource. Just as in this conversation we had earlier, the adjoining property owners, pay for the infrastructure and will pay for the future infrastructure, whereas all these property owners are going to essentially get the property or the benefit for free, right? And so I guess that's the conversation, I think, that's a little bit confusing to me. The other part of the conversation that I have concern with too, is where you're designing that road, I have not seen that property sell, and we don't have any feedback from that property owner.
That's correct.
Whether or not this is something that he would even allow us to do, right?
Right.
So I guess, I would want.
A portion of that project would be proposing to purchase property from him, so it wouldn't be, it would be the road right of way would purchase from him.
Yeah. So our initial cost estimates put about $250,000 into right-of-way acquisition costs.
And so I guess I'd like to hear what his thoughts are, or their thoughts are, about what that looks like, and whether that's something that he would be supportive, or they would be supportive of. Because he's spoke at our city council meetings in the past, right? And I think he had some concerns about any development in that area, so I don't know, those are my thoughts. What's the rest of the council think? Questions? Council Pierce?
So I'm looking at the second map, with all the yellow. Wondering, looking at some of it, are we looking at places where there are homes right now?
No, this is entirely limited to commercial property.
Okay, so
because we see this as a commercial project, and we wouldn't want to take away from residential
Because
users.
I know that, there are still like residential areas and little pockets within the Hermiston main areas, and people have been here for a long period of time, and yet we understand that eventually the city kind of, eventually gets closer and closer. And so I'm just wondering, what are we doing to help those homeowners feel like, okay, yeah, your house is still your house.
Yeah.
What, are there protections in place, or is it just kind of part of the process that is the city?
Generally, this would be something that more ties into our downtown district, which has a lot of houses in it. And the overall intent of the district was to eventually get residences converted into commercial to build up our downtown. So that's why all of our granting is for business development. But outside of the urban renewal process, one of the things that we have done, I worked with one of our land use attorneys about 8 years ago on interpretations in our commercial code, because city had always said that houses in commercial zones are non-conforming uses, and so they have very limited amount of rebuild rights. But the code was a little ambiguous, and so I worked with our attorney at the time to develop an interpretation that said if there is a house in a commercial zone, it always has rebuild rights, it always has expansion, remodel rights as a residential property. And the thing that has done is made it much easier for lending, because a lot of lenders do not like to lend on houses that are in commercial zones unless they know it can remain a residence. So that's really where we made a big policy shift at the city level, is making sure that people in those houses have residential certainty.
Mr. Morgan?
I'm just going to maybe add to there, maybe add some clarity around the conversation about the residences. I think it's probably important when we look at that yellow outlined area, all that really is talking about is that's the area that from a tax revenue standpoint, all of the properties inside of that area, they're going to pay their property taxes the same as normal when we do these urban renewal areas. The only thing that happens is that for the properties inside of that area, value equal to what they had been paying that goes over and above what the frozen base was, that gets diverted into paying for the urban renewal area. So it really has no impact, tangible, like real world instance on any of the residences that there may be a house or two located in there. This urban renewal district, as it's been considered or is being presented, is really just like a one project type of an urban renewal area. All we're really talking about is just putting the roadway infrastructure through from 4th Street to 395 along that alignment that Mr. Spencer mentioned. So even though it extends, onto some of these other properties in terms of the taxing area, really all we're talking about in terms of actual impact on the ground is those roadway improvements as they were shown.
The other question I had, to was, you know, when Home Depot went in, and the strip mall went in, and Stets went in, whatever it was called beforehand, Fuddruckers, was there any sort of commitment from those developers that that infrastructure or that intersection would be improved at some point? It was necessary to improve it, and are they liable now to help pay for the cost of that light?
There was not. And the reason why we actually, I don't like to throw state agencies under the bus, but when Home Depot went in and all of that, we said, this really needs a signal. And ODOT specifically said, this will not meet warrants for a very long time. And we will not allow a signal to go in. And Home Depot said, we'll pay for a signal. And ODOT said, no signal. It doesn't meet the spacing requirements. And so that was a completely lost opportunity.
And now we're talking about putting a signal there.
Yeah.
So is ODOT gonna come back and support us with that?
You know, I asked if they'd help pay for it last time I had a conference call on this, and they were very non-committal.
Interesting. I'll speak to our legislators about that.
So when you talk about spacing, you're talking about from Elm to...
Yeah. See,
there's not...
there is no way to actually meet spacing in this corridor. You have to have at least 1,300 feet of spacing between signals. And so Elm to this driveway is 1,000 feet. So it's about a 300-foot deviation. Given the traffic volumes, ODOT is now, 10 years later, a lot more open to doing a deviation.
At our cost. That's a terrible
Can we go back to Home Depot?
Yeah.
No.
Anybody trying to get out of there going left? Nightmare.
You just don't.
What's that? Yeah, you don't. You go
Just
right.
don't,
Yeah, you
no.
drive around the block. That's terrible.
We brought in a traffic engineer and said, what do we have to do? What does this document need to show to do a signal here now? And ODOT basically said, nothing you can do, we'll do it.
That's what they said about the other
Challenge
way
yourself.
too. There was no reason whatsoever on the face of the earth ever to put a traffic light in. And that went on for years.
Now we got a traffic light.
Well, yes, we've had it for quite a while, and you see why.
And Mr. Mayor, to one of your questions or concerns about the property owner, the process of developing an urban renewal area would engage those property owners in that process to see how they, how they felt about it, what their thoughts were, and so forth. So that's part of the process of putting together the plan and the other things that would come before you for approval ultimately.
The one thing, not to get too far out into the weeds, that we see as a huge benefit for the property owner is that right now he does have a driveway access to Highway 395, but it's located over the Hermiston Drain. And it's very narrow. It gives him really no highway visibility. A street alignment like this gives a direct shot to his property and provides a huge amount of benefit.
Lots of frontage.
So I guess, the pushback that I have is, urban renewal districts do have impacts. And they take significant dollars out of our taxable assessment value base that we use as our budgeting process.
The city currently with the downtown district is giving up about 1.4% of revenue a year.
And this is bigger in assessed value. So, that does impact budget moving forward for the next 20 years as well. And so we have to justify, or try as a council to justify, that investment and loss of revenue to the general fund, and whether or not these property owners should be paying for that. You could probably argue we may never get somebody to invest in a stoplight there. So the fund's got to be, they have to come from somewhere, and potentially that property may never develop if we don't put a road in there and make it more accessible. So, we've got to balance both of those issues out, and which one is going to provide hopefully some additional revenue through development and future growth versus, the offset of the cost of property owners getting benefit from this and paying for it as a normal process of development. So, anyway. good conversation. I'm supportive of moving forward, at least with the conversation, because there's going to be a public process.
Yes.
And this is just, should we move forward, right? That's kind of the question. Council Primer?
Yeah, so, but in what you were saying just a moment ago, while within urban renewal district, with creating an area that has the potential to create growth, more taxable properties as each one of these properties grows, the potential to pay off that urban renewal district earlier and earlier and earlier grows exponentially as well. That's correct as well?
That's correct. To kind of throw it into perspective with our downtown urban renewal district, we started that one very conservatively with how we anticipated revenue growth. We always hoped there would be nice development. 2 years into it, we got a hotel that had $7 million in assessed value and put us ahead of revenue projections. We're still ahead of revenue projections based on one development.
Wouldn't it be true that anything they put on this property is going to be an improvement?
Yes.
Because there is nothing on this property.
Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the Popeyes. Assuming they build sometime this year, even though we know they're coming, they have approved plans. I was talking with our code enforcement officer who used to work with the assessor's office, and it doesn't matter when we form this district this year, because they're going to look at the January 1 assessment, which there's nothing on that property. So anytime they build, we'll be able to capture that, assuming we get an urban renewal district formed before January 1 of next year. So that will be true of all of them. But to flip your question around, the city would get that revenue if it weren't in an urban renewal district. It's something like that.
So, I guess you could also make it very structured in the fact that, the argument about government is we never give back money, right? So our government tends to grow, and as the resources grow, we find uses for it. So to push back against my argument, you could say it wouldn't have to be for 20 years. So if it grew fast enough, to Councilor Primer's point, and we were able to pay that debt back quicker, maybe we canceled it in 10 years or 7 years or whatever, and put the restriction on there, it's only to be used for this. And even if our fund grows, we're paying off our debt, and we're not going to find other uses for that fund.
Not to be glib, but I've always been a great believer in the government that governs best, governs least. And my goal is to sunset the downtown one early too, because it's been running ahead of projections. And the Prairie Meadows one, I don't know if that one will run ahead of projections. This one probably will, especially if it's a one project.
But and also one of the, just to throw out, the special districts often come out in concern for these types of developments as well. But with the new requirements that we implemented with the Prairie Meadows, it would be the same. If we get to a certain percentage, then we automatically start to share the revenue. And so I think going down this path, we'll hear more comments, and we'll be able to make sure we have a good plan that everybody can work with. So our request.
Okay. So I think what you're looking for is the council in favor of moving forward with some sort of concept around this?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor McCutcheon.
Now, I have a question. I'm looking at the map on page 42 of the space between Aspen and Oregon Street. Is there any roadway, I haven't been to the north and second, is there any roadway already in place? And if so, how much do we need to actually develop coming north?
If you look at the map that we have here with our conceptual layout, we're already refining this, I guess would be the best way to look at it. And the extension that would be Northeast North Street, where Lily has the cursor right now, that one we see as being absolutely essential, because you have Burger King, you have Ixtapa, you have Popeyes. All of these things will be so much better served if there's a signal and the ability to get stuff in and out. The next road over, Northeast 2nd Street, there's a road now that serves those houses. But as far as actually coming all the way down and connecting to Aspen Drive, probably doesn't serve a lot of benefit. And I think that would be better as a cul-de-sac just to keep the houses, maybe a back entrance. But having a road that comes all the way down for Second Street to Aspen Drive is probably just going to wind up making some parcels that are unbuildable by commercial space needs a lot of land, and having the street 250 feet apart probably isn't going to be good for commercial development.
Councilor? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Any public comment this evening?
Josh Roberts, 1709 Northeast 6th Place. So I actually am intrigued by this concept, and certainly where I live, it makes things more convenient. But I do have some very grave concerns along Highway 385. I would say that this is probably one of the most dangerous sections of our town. We get crash after crash after crash between Elm and Theater Lane. Turning left out of O'Reilly's or Ace Hardware Grocery Outlet, there's a lot of near misses. There's a lot of, not near misses, there's just a lot of crashes in through there. And my concern, especially, is the distance between Harper Road and where this new road is going to come out is going to be very small. So I guess as you're coming up with this concept, I think more needs to be done on 395 to address the cross traffic. I'm not so sure that a light even will be enough. So I'm just throwing this out there. As you're coming up with these concepts and you're talking to ODOT, there needs to be more to control traffic, kind of like they did outside of Starbucks and Jack in the Box, where they've got some barriers, some things to help with that flow. If you don't, I think our crash rate's gonna just be through the roof. And as much benefit as this will bring for business and revenue, it's not worth public safety if we can't mitigate those things. So,
good point. Thank you. We can continue to work with our ODOT partners and evaluating that for sure. That is a state highway, and so they would have to weigh in on the safety profile as well as working with us, because I've seen opportunities for turn lanes and segmented turn lanes so you can block off that center lane and force traffic in certain directions so that you can mitigate accidents. Okay, any other public comment? All right, can I get do you need a motion? Is that what you're looking for? Motion to direct staff to begin preparation of relevant urban renewal planning documents.
So moved.
Second. Been moved by Councilor Barone, second by Councilor Primer, that we direct staff to begin preparation of relevant urban renewal planning documents. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, February 2023 financial report, Mr. Smith.
Yes, Mr. K.
Okay, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you for my late coming financial report. Days long. You all have been very patient. Thank you. Finance, 8 months into the year, 2/3 of the year. We are doing well in the urban renewal district. They're 98% of their projected revenue for tax receipts. As I said a couple months ago, I think they will exceed that by some margin greater than 5%. We'll see how good a prognosticator I am. As Mr. Spencer said, when this was set up, I'm sure Holiday Inn Express was not on the horizon, but there they are, and that helps. We look at the general fund resources. You can see right now through 8 months we are 4.6% ahead on the year. That equates to roughly $750,000. A lot of that has to do with fees and service charges for a number of things we do, building permits and things like that. I can't put my finger on any one thing other than we do have a bit higher collection rate on property tax. So I'm keeping an eye on that. I think that trend will hold through the end of the year. I can't say for certain it will, but with 4 months left to go in the fiscal year, that's a pretty good sign.
We look on the expense side, you can see that we are right now just short of 600,000 below budget on our expenditures, which is 3.3% on almost $17 million worth of expenditures for the year. I have given a message to our general fund department directors and heads, keep up the good work, because the budget's coming. And I think we're seeing concern in the last couple of months. People are really looking at their expenditures and what they need to spend money on. And I commend them for that. This is just a breakdown of by total functions within the general fund: administration, public services, public safety, and non-departmental. Non-departmental took a hit this month because we paid some bills that had been sitting or had been anticipated, finally they came. But overall, we're sitting very well at 3.1% below projection, about 350,000. So what's that mean for the general fund in general? As we look where we are now in the year versus where we had hoped we would be, we are much better positioned this year than last as far as where we are in the fund balance. We will be spending some of that balance down by the end of the calendar year, simply because we'll be doing some stuff at Penny Avenue with part of the ARPA money. But we are very much in better shape to end the year to start fiscal 24 than we were last year. And again, I point my finger at the department heads making good decisions on expenditure control and the fortunes of favor that are providing us increased property tax revenue and service charge and feedback. The pool will be open before the end of the year, so that'll help a little bit. We look at all of the utility and street funds report. Street fund is always lagging in what the state sends to them as far as what that we are entitled to, but everything else looks pretty good. Actually, regional water's doing a lot better than I thought they would. But utility fund and HES sitting in real good positions right now for the year. I have no concerns in that regard for their operation. And finally, you have in this month's packet the addition of the Penny Avenue project and the AWS system expansion that pretty much in 1 month almost doubled our CIP by adding those two projects. So you have them there on the chart. I will defer to Mr. Morgan if he would care to talk about the updates to those particular projects that had activity through the month of February. I don't know if you could read that or not, Mr. Morgan.
Well, I should be able to speak to it from memory. Well, number 5, system improvements. You'll remember that's to increase the capacity of our water supply out of our well number 5 area. Due to the importance of that well in supplying our peak summer demand, we're really not going to be doing much of that work through the summertime. So most of that work is going to hold off until the fall with more of the piping infrastructure work taking place here in the spring and in the summer. On the North First Place water line replacement project, obviously that's tied in with the North First Place roadway construction project. You'll all remember awarding that competitive bid came in at the last council meeting, and we anticipate a contractor probably mobilize in sometime mid-April, I would expect, to begin doing that work, and everyone will get to experience not driving on North First for a while. Lift station number 6, very excited to report that that has been completed. Maybe go to the next slide.
And the only reason that's still on there is we're still paying some bills on that.
Lift station number 3 upgrade, probably my least favorite project in a long time. That project, maybe I shouldn't share, but I'm hopeful that they will be paving that project on 395 this week, is what last that I heard. So don't hold me to that, but that's what the word is that I'm hearing from the engineers. Originally, they were hoping to pave on the 17th, which would be Friday. A few weeks ago, that had gotten pushed back till next Monday. Sounds like they're back on schedule here a little bit. So at the very least, feeling very confident that everything will be wrapped up with that project in its entirety by the end of the month here. Then on the AWS water system expansion project, things are getting going. If you've been down on Feetville Road here lately, you've noticed a very large stack of blue plastic pipe for us to extend the water main from First over to Kelly. Also, if you've been on Highway 207 by the water treatment plant, you've noticed some big holes and trenches in the ground. They're boring, and I know some of us are still reluctant to engage in any boring after lift number 3 project, but that boring is not going underneath the railroad, that is only going underneath Highway 207. So that project has been proceeding well. So there should not be any rail cars under there, but we hope. So, but things are proceeding well with that boring. They're already well on their way in that boring effort. Then on the Penny Avenue extension, again, you just awarded that contract this evening. That's what I got.
Mr. Moore, you did talk about 395 and McDonald's property easement. Any progress made on that?
Yes, so I guess my takeaway from dealing with that project is I would encourage, and I didn't get paid by any of our local attorneys in town to say this, but I would encourage everybody to make sure that all of your affairs are well in order because we're running into some long processes of trying to get various trusts and estates and everybody to work together. So we do still feel like we're moving in the right direction on that. It's just taking a long slog to work through the various owners and trustees and those types of things. So it's proceeding just very slowly. So
I'm glad you clarified on that one, because it was first it sounded like we were getting sued.
No.
Mr. Kay, one question I did have was in transportation. The transportation expenditure detail was 43% over budget. And can you explain that? And it looks like they're 20,000, but less than 20,000 short of their annual goal at this point.
I would defer to Mr. Morgan because that's a process that we have in contract in connection with, I think, Kayak and the Tribe.
Yes, so they'll be coming to you in our next supplemental, which I think is next council meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, so really the bus with Kayak, that's on budget, everything's working along fine with that. The real challenge and the real rub that we've run into is with the senior and disabled taxi program. So it's a very high level of service that we provide to folks, going door to door, delivering them, where they need to go. Meanwhile, and I talked about this several years ago, but when they began aggressively raising the minimum wage here in the region, driving taxis, basically it's a very labor intensive service. And so meanwhile, you have the taxi company having to struggle against, when McDonald's is paying $15 an hour starting out wages, those types of things. So not only are they, having challenges getting really just any drivers, but they want to make sure that they're ensuring that they're, good quality drivers that are there doing good service for the community. And so they were really struggling up against some challenges with being able to provide that service for what we were paying them. And so we renegotiated their contract here back in October timeframe. And so what that did is it puts us on a path so that we can combine our senior disabled taxi program with our workforce taxi program, not on the side where the public would notice, but on the back end from a reimbursement standpoint. That also aligns with how the state is going to be sending their funding to us for both those programs moving forward. I feel comfortable negotiating the contract that way and relaying that to you now, because it's not going to be a permanent long-term liability on the city, because you all remember here about 4 years ago, maybe it's been longer than that now, where now every employee in the state is taking home 0.1% less in your paychecks as a result of the transit tax. And so that's what goes toward paying for our work taxi program, which is probably well over-resourced in terms of what we have available. And so the state has been working to combine those funds that pay for the senior program with the funds that pay for the workforce programs, because the ones that were paying for the senior programs were being paid for with cigarette taxes, which have obviously been going down quite a bit over the years. And so moving forward, beginning July 1st, the amount of grant funding that we have secured moving forward for next fiscal year will be about at least $92,000 per year higher than what it has been previously. So that's more than enough to compensate for what the contract was renegotiated for this last fall. So a short-term overage from what we had originally budgeted, but long-term I feel confident that we'll be back on track.
So when you say renegotiated the contract, that was not something that had to come in front of the council for approval?
Yeah.
It was within your guys' approval spectrum. And so budget adjustment, or we're gonna have to do a budget, supplemental budget change, okay. And will the updated dollars that you spoke about help compensate for the revenue that we lost this year in the transportation program?
No, not the short term, no.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions on the financial report?
And I would leave you that you will be considering a supplemental appropriation budget next council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kane.
Thank you.
All right, so we are now, we went and we did 12C already earlier, so we're on to committee reports. Any committee reports? Oh, yes. Let's take a public comment. Is there any public comment on the February 2023 financial report? Seeing none, can I get a motion to accept the February financial report as presented? So moved. So moved by Councilor Harden, second by Councilor Huron, that we accept the February 2023 financial report as presented. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for catching that. City committee liaison or committee reports. Yes, Ms. Myers.
Councilor McCarthy and I attended Parks and Rec. Highlights of that was going over the planning meeting that was had for Legacy Park. A few meetings were put out for that, but we opted to take the opportunity to allow some of the grade schools to come up with some different kind of names than what we had to choose from. So, and also a very good thing, I think, the Parks and Rec department decided to go with in-person swim lesson sign-up as opposed to online, which was extremely frustrating for people. They were unable to move their families of however many they had around at that point in time so that they could then be able to get all of their children into swim lessons within a timeline that the parents could deal with. Correct? Okay. And let's see. Some of our equipment was stolen from Riverfront Park, so we're on hold until
The whole trailer.
Yeah, and the trailer, yeah, so on hold until they get that there. Would you like to?
We probably won't have it covered completely by insurance. So that's the other part of figuring that out is as we try to build the park, there'll be an additional cost for the playground.
And that was about?
And then the Heroes project is
Okay.
making progress. Water is being installed.
And they also have tentatively planned their first tournament?
Tournament for June 10th.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't been up to EOTech lately, there's a lot of action going on in those fields.
Things going on up there, yeah.
Councilor Grant?
Did the folks that attended the evening, did they come up with any interesting names for the park?
They did, they had, and we took those into consideration and we'll put those in the pot, check it up and see where, you know, the most appropriate name possibly for that park.
The committee didn't feel too strongly about the options that were presented from that initial community meeting. So that's why we wanted to seek out
Some
maybe,
more opinions.
maybe some of the alternative names for Loma Vista or something like that.
Other committee reports? I sat in on the Stepping Stones Alliance board meeting. They are moving forward. They're trying to put together a 5-year plan for PATH, which I think is going to be helpful for us, especially in budgeting. They did find some more safe sleep space time. They're going to stay where they're at, so that's good news, that people won't have to re-find the sleep center. They're working with Mike Atkinson. He's been very generous in helping them to figure out how they can both cohabitate in a facility together. So that's good news for the community. They are planning some work crews, so if you have a skill set that would include building, they are doing some Conestoga Hut building every weekend from the start of April through like May, except for Easter weekend in there. So if you are interested in volunteering for them, I can connect you with that. And then they're doing a convener conference, which is going to kind of bring all community partners together in one place for a gathering on May 3rd, Wednesday, from 9 to noon. And people are welcome to participate. It's at Umatilla City Hall. Any other committee reports? Mayor's report, it's really late, so I'm going to keep it simple. Once it's Distinguished Citizens Award Banquet, awesome to see those people get recognized and awarded. Read to the second graders, attended the Sports Boosters Banquet, went to the West End Mayors and Managers meeting. I wanted to congratulate Martha's House on 10 years celebration, so that's exciting. OPB was in town last week. We got to meet with them, Oregon Public Broadcasting Organization. They wanted to hear more of Oregon or Eastern Oregon's story and get into their own connections out here. I was interviewed on the Oregon Bridge podcast, so if you guys know about Oregon Bridge, they have a podcast. I was interviewed last week on that. It's up and available if you want to listen to it. Kind of interesting stuff. I also want to congratulate the people in the police department on the good work that they've done over the last couple weeks. Helping keep people safe and putting their lives on the line and saving lives. So please pass along my appreciation to those individuals and make sure that they get recognized from the city council, that their heroic work is valued, and we appreciate them as employees and staff.
We'll have them at 4 of them at the next meeting.
Awesome, thank you. Council report. Yes,
so as many of you know, I'm on the Oregon Disability Commission, and apparently there was a spot on the executive committee, and so they asked me if I'd slide into that, and so I said yes. So that happened. And you know, seeing that we have now as part of our goals to take a look at sidewalk accessibility during the winter, and thinking about the fact that the disability rights movement, we just lost one of our key leaders about a week ago, but then seeing like Hermiston being so proactive in everything, it's no secret that I have multiple disabilities myself, to the point where when I first got hired by the public, Lily used to cut up my dinner for me and have it waiting for me so I could sit at the table equitably with everyone. And so we're working on making the sidewalks equitable, and I'm, at the commission, like doing work and representing Hermiston. It's just, I gotta tell you, I'm gonna get misty-eyed if I don't be quiet. So just letting you guys know that, we're doing awesome work, and we're making it possible for others to get out there and do equitably awesome work. So that's my piece.
Very good. Others, Council? Yes, Mr. McCarthy. Mrs. Machida first. Okay, Ms. Drum.
I want to give a shout out to the Chamber for an excellent job doing the Distinguished Citizens Awards Banquet. And I also want to piggyback on the comments that you made for the first responders. I so much appreciate the work that you guys do. I also appreciated seeing the highlight, the way the Umatilla County Fire District 1 distinguished the female that are part of the department. On March 8th, it was Women's International Day. And so I thought it was pretty cool to see the women. So many jobs we think they're just mostly for males. And it was so nice to see the highlights of that. So much appreciate that.
Mr. McCarthy?
I'll piggyback on the Distinguished Citizens Award. Being also on the Chamber Board, I received lots of compliments on just how, I'm not talking about the work that I did. Some of you that were there. The mayor got a nice walk on it. I know there was a lot of work put into it, and so I'm very glad that we got to honor the people that were honored there. Very deserving. And then I also want to mention that I actually, along with Byron, we both attended the Martha's House open house this last Friday. Got to see inside one of the rooms, learn about, they have kind of an adopt-a-room program where organizations can essentially shop for and set up rooms as families move out. And of course, people that go there get to take everything the room is stocked with to them when they find their own place. We met with the board of directors, most of them, and also the, I don't know what his official title is, but Stephen is basically the administrator of the building. And it was very educational, and we got to learn a lot about the people that they have and the space that they have available. There's still, I think, 2 or 3 rooms open. And they're looking to fill them.
Anything else, Council? Yes, Ms. Brown.
Just want to remind everyone that the NCAA tournament kicks off this next week, or this week already, and supporting my boy Xavier, so my alma mater, hoping they go deep, number 3 seed, so shout out to my alma mater.
All right, anything else, Council? Okay. How about our youth advisory report? You had to wait all night for this. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. Good evening, I'm Stormy Richmond. I'm a member of the Youth Advisory Council. Mr. Bacon kind of took my light earlier, but as a part of the Stardust Dance team, we did compete this weekend in our 2023 district champ competition. I don't mean to brag or toot my own horn, but I really would love to. We had a very successful weekend. It was full of amazing happiness, and we literally made history. We brought home 3 first places, qualifying for state, which will be happening in about 2 weeks. And so far, knock on wood, we are first in the whole entire state for Washington. We also have a spring preview that is coming up March 20th. It's located in the Hermiston High School gym. We absolutely love to see the community support and watching all of our routines that are going to be going to state. A large event happened March 9th. A lockdown had taken place, a fire drill. I guess some kids had started the fire in the band room. No further details have been released. I have no idea if these students were caught or not. But the fire was cleared and cleaned up, and I do want to give a huge thank you to the police department and the fire department for protecting our student body and clearing the fire safely and helping us out in everything. March 20th is also the high school band concert. It begins at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. And lastly, we had a very successful Sadie Hawkins dance. Unfortunately, we were not blessed with this last year, so I'm glad I was able to come back with a big bang. A lot of students had a lot of fun in the old commons, or in the cafeteria, and I heard it was a great success.
Thank you, Stormy. So was the fire actually in the band room or the bathroom?
It was in the band bathroom.
Oh, okay.
It was in that wing, but it was a bathroom.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, not good. All right, Ms. Schmidt.
I have nothing more for you. You talked about all the things I was going to talk about.
Oh, that's cool. Well, everybody have a good rest of your evening.